Welcome back to Vintage Camera Digest. Today we're going back to 1952 to take a look at the Zenobia R medium format camera, so stay tuned. A couple of months ago, one of my dedicated viewers of this channel, John, sent me an email that said, "Hey, I've got the perfect camera for you to try out and review. It's a Zenobia R, and I think you'll love it." Well, I'd never heard of a Zenobia before, so of course I'm game. So he sent me this little gem, and I'm hopefully going to give it a chance to shine. Now, to understand the Zenobia R and where it fits in camera history, we need to go all the way back to the 1930s and the Zeiss Icon Iconta A. The Iconta A is a folding 4.5 by 6 format camera, and in 1940, the Japanese company Okada Kogaku released a copy of the Iconta A named the Waltax. Now, Okada actually survived World War II and continued to manufacture cameras, and in 1951 the name of the company was changed to Daiichi Kogaku, and soon saw the release of the Zenobia line of medium format folding cameras. The new Zenobia branded cameras inherited the design features of the Waltax, and the first two cameras were the Zenobia C and P models. In 1952, the Zenobia R was announced, and the R in the name reflects the inclusion of a rangefinder, something that the Waltax and the Iconta A cameras didn't have. So we can sort of consider the Zenobia R as an Iconta A with a rangefinder. So let's talk about that for just a minute. The rangefinder here is what we call uncoupled, meaning it's not directly connected to the focusing mechanism of the lens. Most rangefinder cameras that you see these days feature a coupled rangefinder. Take the Yashica Electro 35 here. Turning the focusing ring of the lens operates the rangefinder, and you see the two images come together in the viewfinder. However, with the Zenobia R, the rangefinder is operated by this lever on the top right camera housing. Moving this with your thumb while looking through the viewfinder will show you the superimposed images coming together as usual. But once you've achieved the proper focusing distance, you'll need to read the distance scale on the lever, then manually transfer that distance to the lens, referring to the distance scale on the lens. It's not a bad system. It's much better than having to just outright guess at the distance, which really wasn't that uncommon back then. But there can still be a bit of guesswork when setting the focus if the rangefinder indicates a distance which falls between two marked distances. For example, if the rangefinder indicates somewhere between 4 and 5 feet, well, you sort of have to guess exactly where to set the lens between those two marks on the lens. So it's not a perfect solution, but like I said, it's better than not having the rangefinder at all. The lens is a Neo Hesper 75mm 3.5, which is a 4-element Tessar design, and according to the literature that accompanied the camera upon release, all elements are coded. The shutter is a Seikosha Rapid with speeds from 1 to 1/500th of a second plus B. Now, as I said earlier, the format of the Zenobia is a 4.5 by 6 or 645, so you get 16 shots on a roll of 120 film. Film advance is by using the knob on the top left of the camera. It's not an automatic advance though. You'll need to open and refer to the red window on the back to watch for the next number to show up, which will be printed on the backing paper of the film. Now, I'm going to stop right here for just a minute because it occurs to me that not everyone watching this channel might know what I'm talking about when I refer to the red window on the back. But it's a very basic, low-tech method for winding film to the next shot. If you've ever developed a roll of 120 film and saw the backing paper has these numbers, well, that's what they're for. And you'll also notice that there are several different numbers printed in several different places. Which ones you use will be determined by the format of the camera. If you're using a 645 format, such as the Zenobia here, the red window on the camera will be positioned to let you see the top row of numbers. If you're using a 6x6 format camera, the red window will be positioned in the middle back of the camera to align with the middle row of numbers, which are going to give you 12 shots. And if you're using a 6x9 format camera, the red window will align with one of the bottom 3 rows of numbers, giving you 8 shots. Now, when you load the film, once you have it attached to the take-up spool, you can close the back. In this case, you don't need to pay much attention to the start mark arrows on the film. That's for cameras that have an automatic advance. And I don't mean like a motor drive, I just mean that the camera knows when to stop for the next frame of film. But on this camera, you'll open the cover to the red window and advance the film until the number 1 shows. Then once you've taken a shot, you'll wind the film to number 2 and so on. You just need to be careful not to wind the film past the next number. It's easy to do, and I've done it many times. The red window on this camera has a sliding cover. So once you've wound to the next number, you can close the cover to further protect the film from any light that might be coming in through the window. Now, not all cameras that use the red window advance method have an additional cover for the window, like this Agfa Isolette. It has the red window but no cover. But the backing paper of the film is usually sufficient to keep the film from being light struck. And the particular color of red used in these windows is one that black and white films, at least, don't have very much sensitivity to. Another thing to note, the camera has no built-in meter. So I'll be using my little shoe mount Astrohori meter for the shoot today. So I've got a couple of rolls of Ilford FP4 and I'm just headed downtown. So let's see what we can find. One of the benefits of this camera is that it's just small and is easily pocketed. I don't even have a bag with me today. I have 2 rolls of FP4. I've got 1 roll in my pocket. I've got this clip-on meter attached, so that way I don't have to have a handheld meter. Like I said, the benefit is it's just small and sort of a take anywhere camera. So that's what we're gonna treat it as today. So I'm gonna sort of frame this up. It has an uncoupled rangefinder, so which means I'm gonna focus using the rangefinder first and then set my distance scale according to what the rangefinder gives me. All right, so the sign in the background, the rangefinder says just past 10 feet, not 15. All right, so I'm gonna change the lens to just past 10 feet. Right. All right, so this meter, and it's telling me 1/60th of a second at f9. I'm gonna shoot for something at f8. All right, let's cock the shutter, frame it up, and there we have a shot. Operate the rangefinder with your right thumb till it comes into focus. Looks like just at 15 feet. Gonna shade it again as I wind on to number 3. Shutter speed release is on the left. Makes for a slightly odd experience for me. This is an interesting little area right here. I don't know how close I can focus this camera, but we've got a little bit of rust going on here. And you know, I like rust. With this meter on, sort of gets in the way. Let's go with 60th at f8. 150 is the closest I've got, so we'll do that at f8. Okay. Cock that, right? And I need to transfer the distance to the lens. We're looking at just a touch shy of 4 feet. So we'll see how, well, I've got f8, so that'll give us some depth of field, hopefully, to deal with any issues. Meter's reading 160 at f8. All right. F8, I've got it set to 150, which is as close as I've got here. All right. Okay. So we got this wind chime hanging from the wall. We've got this nice brick texture here. I like that. That's got some good potential. All right, but it's gonna be super close focused for this. Well, we're gonna do the best we can. I might play it a couple of different ways, we'll see, but I'm gonna focus as close as possible. All right. So I'm actually gonna slide the lens all the way as close as it'll go. Lock the shutter, let's take a reading. 1/200 at f8. I'm gonna go with 1/100 at f8 because I'm shooting against some white brick. Do a few shots of this just to make sure. Just one. Now let's go with, what can I get at 1/50th of a second? Just to give me some more depth of field. F16 at 60. Let's see. Yep, F16 at 1/60th of a second. Instead of F16, I'm gonna do F11. And then I'll do F16. All right, check my distance. Slide that over to the side just a bit. All right, distance as close as it'll be. All right, let's wind that on. Shutter is cocked. All right. Of course, everything I'm shooting so far is vertical because that's the default orientation of this camera. All right, so distance, almost 5 feet. Still gonna go with a deeper depth of field just to counter, well, just in case the focusing isn't perfect. Which on this, it's probably not going to since I'm transferring the readout here to the lens. Let's go 1/100 at f11. All right, let's set the distance. And it is right at 15 feet, a little past 15 feet. Well, I moved distances, so that's not gonna work. I need to keep the same distance. All right, go this. Let's do that again, and instead of 1/250th, let's go with 1/100th of a second. Okay. All right, so that was 2 exposures. One was right what the meter said, and then the other one was a stopover. So a shot that I saw really quick was these steps, and they've got some nice directional light coming in there, some hard shadows. I like the texture. All right, so what have I got as far as distance? 10 feet distance. Just about right, I would think. All right, so I want to shoot at f8. So that gives me 1/200th of a second at f8. All right, we're cocked, ready to go here. Let's do that again, and that was what, at 1/250 at f8. Let's go with 1/100, the same shot. Behind me we have the railroad tracks up the Coca-Cola sign. It's definitely a photo. Yeah, this distance is almost at infinity for this. Between 50 feet and infinity. F8 at 1/250th of a second. I like that. We can stick with that. Like I say, we're going horizontal on this one. It's good. One more shot on this roll, and that was 1/250th at f8. Let's go 1/100 at f8. All right, that should be nice. So that finishes up this roll. Let's go put in another roll and move on to a different location. So I needed to change the roll of film, and I forgot to do that before we got here. So let's do that real quickly. This is an easy film change. Make sure I wind it all the way. pull this little tab on the bottom and it just pops right out. All right, let's pop in another roll of FP4. Spool is really easy to change. I'd read where some people were having issue with the spools fitting in this camera, but I have had no issue whatsoever out of it. It loads easy. Probably one of the easiest loading medium format cameras I've seen. I think the worst medium format camera for me to load has got to be the Pentax 67. I get aggravated at it every single time. I'm sure there's a trick to it, but there's no trick to this camera because this camera loads nice and easy. All right. Takes up easy. I'm gonna wind it just to where I can see the arrows there. All right, I'm gonna wind it till I see the 1 show up in the window. She's ready to go. So I want to spend a little time around this sculpture. This sculpture was made in honor of all the local cotton farmers, and it makes an interesting subject here. So I've got 2 different ways I'm going to approach this. We've got one where we've got deep depth of field because there are several buildings in the background there, another statue, there's a church way back there. So I'm going to try to do one where I've got deep depth of field, see all that? And then I'm gonna try to do one where I don't have very much depth of field. So the rangefinder says 15 feet. Okay, so I'll stand right here. Have to remember not to move once I've set this focus. All right, so got that. All right, so what does the meter say? It says 1/80th of a second at f16. All right, so I don't have 180. I do have 1/100, and I have 50. I'm going to go with 100 for this, and maybe not close it down all the way to f16. All right, focus is set, aperture is set, shutter speed is set. Just gotta wait on the cars to move. So this should be deep depth of field. That's the plan. All right, so let's do one with shallow depth of field. 1/500th of a second is the top speed here, so that's what I've got. f5.6 at 500th of a second. It's not going to be super shallow depth of field, but it'll be okay. All right, let's see what else we've got while we are here. So sort of details we have. 1/250th of a second at f8. Focus is set. Shutter speed is cocked. Aperture is set. Focus is set. Let's try one with a shallower depth of field. So 1/500th of a second at 5.6. Okay. Distance hasn't changed. All right, so let's see what we can do. What if I can get some detail shots? We can get some horizontals out of this. Again, there's an issue with just how close we can get to this. Let's go 1/200th at f11 here. And let's make sure that I've transferred this distance to the lens, just under 4 feet. Cock the shutter, and we're gonna go horizontal for this. So we have the old county courthouse here. Got the clock right here. The door, the entrance, very impressive architecture. Let's see what we can do with that. 1/125th at f8. And we're looking right at 25 feet. Let's do a horizontal out of this. Cock the shutter. Everything is set. It's good. I'm gonna do another one. I like this shot. Let's don't do the same exposure. Let's do a little bit. Let's do like between 5.6 and f8. So I think this is going to be horizontal. Then I'm going to get a couple of verticals out of it. Same exposure, same distance. Cock the shutter. I do like the door. This is a little bit more dramatic of an angle. I'm going to leave the exposure the same. Let's do a horizontal. Cock the shutter. I think I moved the camera when I tripped that. Need to go easy on the shutter release. That was much better. There's a couple more things around here I want to shoot. The one thing about having the little meter on the top of the camera all the time is that it gets in the way of your cap. All right, so there's my point of focus at almost 4 feet. All right, so my meter is 1/80th of a second at f8. I want to shoot with something a little less depth of field. So I've got 1/500th of a second at 3.2. So this lens goes to 3.5. Let's open this thing all the way up and do a 1/500th of a second exposure. And then we'll see which one of these is in focus. Let's do one at a deeper depth of field. I can go 1/100th of a second at f10. So I'll just put that somewhere between f8 and 11. And change this to 1/100th of a second. I'm gonna leave the focus the same. Cock the shutter. All right. So I'm gonna finish this up sort of right here. I'm just shooting this railing straight on. I have metered it 1/250th of a second at 5.6. So I've got that. All right, let's make sure we have the focus set correctly. All right, there's the rangefinder. All right, so that lines up. And we're looking at almost just past 6 feet. Cock the shutter. That was at f5.6, so that was a shallower depth of field. Let's go really shallow. 1/500th at 3.5. Let's make sure we've got the focus set as close as we can. All right, again, that's just shy of 6 feet. And I'm wide open on this. One more shot, what can we do? That's interesting. Let's go that way. Shoot from a low angle, shooting up. Have the clock in the back. Go horizontal with this. Got one shot left. I want deep depth of field if I can get it, or as deep as I can. So let's go 1/50th of a second at f13. All right, so I'm going to focus on the clock back there. Hopefully it'll give you some interesting depth of field. Some interesting shapes there. All right, so 25 feet, almost exactly is what it's telling me. All right. And that is the roll. All right, let's go process, see what we've got. So just to prove how pocketable this camera is, I've put it in my pocket. Well, I was pretty pleased with the results. It was a different experience for sure using the rangefinder than transferring that distance info to the lens. I was afraid it would be difficult to set the lens properly, especially on the distances that were between the marks. But as it turns out, it wasn't that difficult at all. A couple of the images were a bit softer than I'd have liked, but none were really out of focus. And I think with a bit more practice, I'd have this down pat. Another thing I noticed was that what you see in the viewfinder can be different from what the lens is seeing. Now, I expect that to happen when using a rangefinder. I just didn't expect it to be as much of a difference as it was. In some of the shots of the courthouse, I was trying to compose for symmetry, but ended up with shots that were a bit off. On the positive side, the Neo Hesper lens is quite sharp, and when you nail focus, it really shows. Another plus is that it has a 10-bladed aperture that remains quite circular at any f-stop setting, so it should be able to easily produce nice out-of-focus highlights, or bokeh. Another positive point is that changing film is a breeze. The rolls pop in and out without being too fiddly. Like I mentioned earlier, I love my Pentax 6x7, but changing film in it drives me crazy. No problem at all with this one though. But I think the best thing about this camera is its size. It's small for a medium format camera, and it'll fit in your pocket when closed. And for this reason, I'd say it's a great camera to carry along on your daily routines. So what are your thoughts on the Zenobia R? I'd love to hear from you if you have one of these, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss out on any of the cool stuff coming up. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I've been off my usual schedule the last few weeks. I've had a few big projects in my day job that have taken a lot of time, but I hope to be back on a weekly schedule very soon. And I want to give a big shout out to John for sending this camera over for the review. I do like it a lot. So take care, and I'll see you next time.